find a diamond by scratching on the surface. You'll never find a pearl if you wait out on the shore. That's the way it is when you're looking for the answers. Wisdom lies deep, wisdom lies in the search. Look a little deeper, go a little further, search a little harder. Don't you know you've got to grow? You know you've got to grow. You know you've got to grow. You've got to grow.
Hi and welcome once again to Probe. For those of you who are joining us for the first time today, this is a new season where we are probing into the difficult questions that demand answers. Is God a delusion? Or is He really there? Or is He a crutch used by people who cannot think on their own? Let's find out as Dr. Nirmala Abraham speaks to Reverend Sudhakar.
Reverend Sudhakar, welcome once again to Probe. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be with you.
I'm so happy that you are allowing us to ask you difficult questions, which many people I'm sure would want to avoid answering. And in today's episode, we would like to discuss a topic that all the atheists in the world are talking about. And this is God a delusion or is He real? Richard Dawkins, an English biologist from Oxford University, he has published a book called God Delusion. And in this book, he labels God and faith in God as delusions. What is your reaction to this statement?
Well, I would like to actually narrate a personal experience.
Sure.
I go to Oxford every year, at least for 6 weeks,
Okay.
because of my PhD work.
Okay.
And while I was there was supposed to be a debate taking place between Dr. William Lane Craig,
Yes.
who has a PhD in philosophy from the UK and a PhD in theology from Germany.
Wow.
He's an American scholar. And Richard Dawkins,
Okay.
who taught biology for some time in Oxford University.
I would have loved to be there.
But the interesting thing was, Richard Dawkins failed to show up,
Oh.
knowing that William Lane Craig, whom we invited to Hyderabad for the first time ever 2 years ago. He gave a number of lectures in different universities and in Hita and so on and so
Oh.
forth, because he was my research professor of philosophy
Wow.
at Biola Talbot School of Theology, where I studied.
Okay.
Maybe Richard Dawkins was not confident.
Yes.
Maybe he thought the logical loopholes in his arguments would be exposed. So he didn't show up.
That's
And
interesting.
the organizers kept a chair for him and left a notice for him in the newspapers and
Okay.
everywhere. If you change your mind and come into the auditorium, the moment you enter, this will cease to be a lecture by Dr. William Lane Craig,
It'll be a debate.
and it will be a debate. We are still keeping the option open.
Okay.
And then in the newspapers I was following, he says, William Lane Craig is no match to me.
Oh.
And the secular newspapers said, a man with a PhD in philosophy and a theology, if he is no match for you, who is a match for you? Tell us, we'll bring him. They ridiculed him.
Okay.
So that should help us to understand something about Richard Dawkins and his idea that God is a delusion and faith in God also is a delusion. Well, he has written a book, he sold a number of copies. And I know of another book written by another person who has 2 PhDs.
Okay.
One in molecular biology and one in theology. And until recently he was teaching right in Oxford University. He's none else but Dr. Alistair McGrath. And he wrote a book in response to this book, and the title of that book is Dawkins' Delusion. We have to now decide whether Dawkins is in delusion, thinking that God is a delusion,
Yes.
or if our belief in God is a delusion, if we have solid rational evidence, scientific evidence, experiential evidence in support of our claim that God is real and not a delusion, then it is actually Dawkins who is in delusion.
Yes.
So that would be my initial response.
Okay. So what logical reasons would you give to prove that God exists?
Well, logic is at the very foundation of science. I'd like to say that even science is based upon the principles of logic. In
Yes.
fact, every discipline of knowledge is founded upon the principles of reason and logic. Now, one of the most foundational principles in science is the law of cause and effect.
Yes.
That every event needs a cause. Every effect needs a cause.
Right.
And that's what we experience all around us, all our lives.
Yes.
If there's a wristwatch, a watchmaker should be there.
Right.
If there's a book, the author and a printer should be there. If there's a building, a builder should be there. A piece of art, artist must be there. If there's a poem, a poet or a poetess should be there. If there's a prescription, prescriber should be there.
Yes.
In the same way, if the universe is proven to be an effect, then we should look for a cause. Some people try to deny the law of cause and effect by talking about the uncertainty principles of Heisenberg or something like that. But it is now established beyond any reasonable doubt that the uncertainty principle of Heisenberg applies to observed universe but not universe in itself.
Yes.
It is a universe that is affected by our intrusion, and
Right.
we are unable to find the location and velocity of an subatomic particle, and that shows our inability to measure. It doesn't show anything uncertain about the position and the velocity itself.
Yes.
So, the Heisenberg's law of uncertainty, if you apply it to everything, then I will ask, should we be uncertain about everything?
Yes.
And if we have to be uncertain about everything, we have to be uncertain about Heisenberg's uncertainty principle also.
Yes. And whatever you are saying is uncertain.
Uncertain. So, the whole conversation breaks down.
Right.
We will not even be able to get started in a conversation. So, there should be at least some certainties. We are not saying that everything is certain,
Yes.
but there are at least some certainties.
Yes.
We cannot be uncertain about
Right.
everything. That is logically not maintainable. That is at the foundation of science.
Okay.
And now the universe is proven to be a finite reality. They are saying it's about anything between 8 to 13.7 billion years old.
Okay.
And 13.7 billions is not infinite. It's finite.
Yes.
And even in its extent, it is finite.
Yes.
And if the universe is finite, that means it came into existence.
Right. At some time there was an origin.
That's right. And if it came into existence, we should naturally, coming from this logical scientific point of view, ask that question about the cause behind the cosmos. So that is a solid argument for me.
Who or what is the cause of the universe?
Universe.
Right.
And that question brings us face to face with the reality of God, the
Yes,
creator, the
that-
cause behind the cosmos.
You know, whenever some bad things happen, like the Twin Towers were bombed, or children are abused, hurricanes take place, or there's economic recession and people become devastated, and earthquakes and so on and so forth. And people ask, where is God in all this? And so they try to prove that there is no God. That is why this is happening. But I want to tell them that they are looking for God in the wrong places. God is not in those things, but God is in what happens after that. When the orphans are taken care of, and when relief goes there and people are helped to come out of this situation, that is where God is. He is in the firefighters who went and fought the fire and helped people to get out of that building. God is there in relief activities. What arguments can you give from different fields other than the Bible to prove that God is not a delusion? All different fields other than logic.
Excellent. Well, the scientific argument called the cosmological argument. All right?
Yes.
The argument based on the question of the origin of the universe.
Yes.
That is one of the most fundamental scientific questions. Every finite, changing, contingent or dependent thing needs a cause.
Yes.
And this is the law of causality. I would like to give indisputable evidences from science to establish that the universe is finite. The second law of thermodynamics,
Yes.
called the law of entropy, says that the universe is running out of energy.
Yes.
If the universe were infinite, it would have infinite energy.
Yes.
And the question of such a infinite universe running out of energy does not arise. But the universe is running out of energy.
Everything is running down. For
Everything
example,
is actually
if you
running
boil water to 100 degrees centigrade,
That's
you
right.
leave it there, it just cools down.
That's right.
It doesn't stay there.
Absolutely.
Right.
You build a new building and just lock it up and leave it like that. What will happen after 10
It
years?
will run down.
It'll run down.
Yes.
That is the law of entropy.
Everything runs down.
Everything.
Water runs from a higher place to a lower place, or electricity goes from a higher potential to a lower potential. Everything is
And in the
running.
process of change from one form to another, energy is lost
Yes.
irreversibly.
Right.
You know it, and I'm glad our audience.
I'm a science student.
Oh.
I graduated in physics.
Oh, great. Nice to know that. So, second law of thermodynamics is establishing
Yes.
that the universe is finite.
Right.
Then Einstein's theory of relativity,
Yes.
his relativity equations
Yes.
are proving that the universe is finite. And based on these, they came up with the Big Bang theory, which is the latest and most accepted theory of the origin of the universe.
Yeah.
That there was a Big Bang
Yes.
with which the universe began, maybe some 13.7 billion years ago, or 8 billion years ago. We are still not certain. We are still in the process of assessing the age of
It's
the
all
universe.
relative, you see.
Well, as far as this is concerned, because they were dogmatic about it and said 50 billion years old.
Yes.
Now, it's gone. It's down to 13.7 to 8 billion.
So
But
the
to
age of the earth also has been running down.
Oh, yes. There is a lot of change, and now they are saying maybe about 5 million years old. From 50 millions, they have come down to 5 million. So, both the question of the age of the universe and the age of the earth, they have been worked on scientifically. So, we need not be dogmatic about those things. The evidence from science is showing that the universe is finite. So, if everything finite needs a cause, if the universe is finite, the conclusion is highly probable. You can't doubt, you can't question. The conclusion is that there is a cause behind the cosmos.
And also, according to the second law of thermodynamics,
Uh-huh.
if everything is running down,
Mhm.
that goes totally against evolution. What they say is that everything came up by the theory of evolution. According to evolution, from smaller things, everything goes up to higher things, which means it's the opposite of running down. So the two are clashing, right?
Yeah, at some level, yes.
Yes.
Some scientists have indeed written that evolution might run into
Trouble.
a problem with the established law, the second law of thermodynamics.
yes.
But I have read evolutionists who are trying to run around that problem and still maintain the theory of evolution. Maybe at the right time we can discuss that.
Yes. Now, let me just change the focus a little bit from science to the spiritual plane.
Okay.
Now, tell me, Reverend Sudhakar,
Uh-huh.
on a personal level,
Okay.
how did you come to know for sure that God exists, that you need God, that you need God to be in your life? Did any of these arguments convince you, or how was it that you were convinced?
Thank you for asking that question. And I think I should be very candid in answering this question.
Yes.
When I was about 15 years old, I was studying in a good Christian boarding school. And first 3 years of my stay in that boarding school, I was introduced by the warden as an ideal boy that everybody else should follow my example.
Yes.
But the same Sudhakar turned out to be a spoiled guy.
Oh.
And I was dismissed from the same hostel for bad behavior.
Oh.
And my life became miserable after that. I did everything young people were doing, early 70s, when I was in high school, to find my life meaningful, enjoyable, pleasurable, and whatnot. And after I did everything, I was still left high and dry.
There was a vacuum in
There
your
was a
life.
vacuum that nothing I did could ever fill. And so I came to the conclusion that there was no meaning in life, and the best thing to do would be to kill myself. And I was contemplating suicide. That was my situation. But during that time, I was arguing with people because I was a kind of rationalistic, scientifically oriented young man at that time.
So did you start searching for this personal creator?
So I began to search and wonder. And it was actually at that time that I had seen a dramatic change in my father's life. He took an about turn. There was joy in him, and he was excited about it. He was telling everybody. He was organizing meetings. It was in one such meeting that I sat and I heard the gospel about God and God incarnate, Jesus Christ, who came in human form to show the way to humanity, to save the humanity. And 38 years ago, as a teenager, I prayed an experimental kind of prayer. I said, Jesus, if you are the creator God who came to rescue humans like me, and if you are the one who changed my father, I need that change. Give me a reason to live, I will live. Otherwise, next few days, I'm going to kill myself. And believe me, God answered my prayer. And my life took an about turn. I experienced that change. In the place of that desire to die, I discovered a desire to live.
You got a new meaning in your life.
I found meaning in life. So although I'm giving you all scientific, logical arguments, the most powerful, most convincing argument is that I encountered this God personally, and my life took an about turn.
So if anyone really wants an answer to these questions, I think they should look for that encounter with the living God.
Absolutely.
Instead of searching in the wrong places where there is tragedies and where there's violence, they should encounter that God and ask that God, if you really are real, speak to me.
Yes.
And show yourself to me. And I'm sure God will.
If we seek, we will find.
Yes.
If we knock on the right door, the door will be opened.
Faith in God is not a blind leap into the dark. In fact, it is a very safe step into a very well-lit room, and there are already so many people standing over there. Now tell me, why is it that so many people don't want to take that step of faith?
Yes, you have rightly said that at least the biblical kind of faith is not a faith that is a leap into the dark.
Yes.
Because we have been seeing that God of the Bible invited his people to reason together with him. In Isaiah chapter 1 verse 18, he says, come, let us reason together.
Yes.
In Isaiah he says, you put down your case and I will argue with you, and let us see if you are right or I'm right.
Yes.
And the same God of the Old Testament who invited his people to reason with him and argue with him commands his people in the New Testament to go and reason with friends about their faith. So that shows to us that Christian faith is intrinsically a reasonable faith.
Yes.
The God of the Bible is a God of reason. What he wants us to believe is reasonable. We can use our reason and examine it and find it to be true. Those who think that Christian faith is a leap in the dark are missing the point.
Right.
The father of the faithful, Abraham, is the best example for us of the true biblical faith.
Yes.
And if you read Hebrews 11 verses 17 to 19, when his faith was tested most severely, he was standing on that mount and he was reasoning, it says, Abraham reasoned in his heart
Yes.
that even if he obeyed God and sacrificed his son, God would bring him back to life
Yes.
and fulfill his promise.
Yes.
That's when he lifted his hands.
In fact, he proved it because he told his servants, you wait here, my son and I will go up and we will come back.
That was a statement of faith.
Yes.
He did not know how, but he
Because he had
promptly
already reasoned out in his mind.
Yes. Otherwise, he would not have actually obeyed.
Right.
It's not just closing our eyes, grinding our teeth, and saying, I don't know how, but I will still believe.
Yeah.
That's not the biblical faith at all.
Absolutely.
So, I'm glad you asked me that question.
Some Russians say this, when their Russian astronaut Yuri Gagarin went into outer space, they say that he did not see God there anyway in outer space. They ask you, have you seen him personally? If you haven't seen him, how can you say that God is there? What would you say to them?
My answer is very simple and straightforward. In fact, somebody responded to Yuri Gagarin then itself and said, if Yuri Gagarin came out of the space suit, he would have immediately, instantaneously seen God. You know what? God, by definition, is invisible because he is not a material being. He is a spiritual being.
Right.
So, looking for the God who is invisible and infinite in the outer space is foolishness.
It's foolishness.
Like even in the material realm, can we see electrons? No.
But yet we believe in them.
But we believe because of the indirect evidence of the electron. Light, for example, we can't see. You ask any physics professor, they'll tell you. But without light, we can't see anything else.
Right.
In the same way, God we cannot see. But without God, we can't see anything because nothing can exist.
Exactly.
When you see the universe and all the intelligibility, all the design, that you cannot but conclude that there is an intelligent and all-powerful creator is inescapable. So powerful that Antony Flew, who for 50 years struck terror in the hearts of, theist philosophers, finally, Antony Flew, in 2004, on BBC, he made a public confession that because of the intelligent design argument and its force, he was giving up on his atheism and believing in God.
That's
and I
wonderful
feel
news.
God has kept the best of evidences for the worst age of skepticism. So today, if somebody is not believing in God, it's not because of the lack of evidence,
Yes.
but because they don't want to. A philosopher said, it is not that God does not exist, I don't want there to be a God. Because if there is a God, he will have to
Make some changes in his
changes in his
lifestyle.
life,
Yeah.
become accountable to God.
Right.
So that sums up, I think.
So it is a matter of choice.
Choice.
It is your choice to want to believe or to just reject it, saying there is no God.
That's right.
Once a skeptic was arguing with me, so I said, all right, so you feel that there's no evidence, or at least there is not enough evidence for the existence of God. I said, of all the knowledge in the whole world, how much knowledge do you think you have? You have 50%? He said, no, maybe about 5% of the whole knowledge. I said, right, 5%. So would you think that maybe God exists in the rest of the 95% knowledge that you do not have? I mean, you can just start people thinking, and if they are open and if they really want to see the truth, they
Yes.
can see the truth. And going back to Russia, Karl Marx said that religion is the opium of the masses. Is the Christian faith also like opium? Do you think that the faith we have in God, it's like an opium that we take?
Well, what he meant was that it just sedates people, does not allow them to think, but he's sadly mistaken. As I have shown, from the Bible, biblical faith is a well-reasoned faith.
And this faith doesn't require that we should leave our mind outside and then stop thinking
we have
altogether.
to love God with all our minds also. So Christianity is not a mindless, irrational, anti-intellectual kind of faith. It is a faith that is founded upon reason, evidence, and experience of the reality of God. Paul says, what can be known is made plain.
Right.
Because the heavens declare the glory of God. The firmament demonstrates his handiwork. And Paul says, those who deny the existence of God or put creation in the place of the Creator God are left with no apologetic, no defense, no excuse.
Right.
Because the evidence is so powerful and so convincing.
So you have established without any doubt that there is God, and this God wants to reveal himself to us human beings, and you have said that it is our duty to get to know this God.
That's right.
But tell us now, before we close, how can one get to know this God if they really want to know God?
Well, I know of a man who was about to commit suicide, and he was waiting for the train to come, and he missed the train, And so he thought he would wait for the next train. But from the train that just went by, some pieces of paper fell. And he picked up those pieces, and one of them was actually a part of a gospel tract which said, God loved the world so much that he gave his one and only Son, Jesus Christ, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish but have life everlasting. So if we are genuinely seeking, we will find him, because it's not actually us seeking him, he is seeking for us. So praying a genuine, sincere, open-hearted prayer to the God of the universe will enable us to enter into a personal relationship with him.
So would you say a small prayer right now, so that if any of our viewers are in that position now and they would like to ask God to come into their lives, maybe as you say that prayer, they could join with you and they can ask God to come into their lives?
Absolutely,
Yes.
why not? Gracious God, infinite one, perfect one, holy one, loving one, you loved us so much that you came into the world to die in our place and to save us and to give us life everlasting. We thank you for it. And we pray for our friends who might be seeking for answers, who might be seeking to enter into a relationship with you. Reveal yourself to them. Enter into their lives and change them forever. And dear friend, all that you need to do is to just simply say this prayer. Lord God Almighty, Creator of heavens and earth, I need you. Come into my life. Change my life. Give me a direction and give me meaning and purpose in life. For sure, God will hear this prayer and guide you in the rest of your life.
Thank you, Reverend Sudhakar. That was really wonderful teaching. It was invaluable. I thank you so much for sparing your precious time to be with us.
Thank you.
Friends, Jesus said, Behold, I stand at the door of your heart and knock. He who hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him. And there is no coercion here, because Jesus is a gentleman. He's knocking on the door of your heart. If you invite him into your life, he will come in. But the decision is yours.
Well, that's really interesting. The atheists and skeptics can say whatever they like, but there is no proof to say that God does not exist. I personally know that God exists because I sense his presence. I talk to him and he hears me and answers me. If you have any challenges or doubts, do write to us at writetoprobe@gmail.com. Well, it's time to take leave now. Next week, I'll bring you another absorbing episode on supernatural beings. Till then, God bless you.
You've got to probe.
Are there angels and demons, or are they merely fictional characters like the Wicked Witch and the Big Bad Wolf of fairy tales?
There are different things that these angels are required to do.
Like the cherubim,
Yes.
the seraphim, they are depicted as angels with wings.
Are they what is known as guardian angels?
All these names give us actually the character
Of Satan.
of Satan.
Even though demons may have some powers, God is almighty.